Okay, for the rest of the 6A assignment, we're going to be making adjustments to our still life project. So go ahead and open your still life from section 5 so we can make some adjustments to it. And the first thing we're going to do is resave this as still 6 in our section 6 assignment folder. Okay. Next, we're going to want to add a new layer. So up in our layer menu, we want to open up our layers panel and make sure everything else is locked if it's not already, and then select your background layer and the plus sign to add a new layer. And this layer is going to be called Table. Click Add, and it should show up right above your background. And while making sure our table layer is selected, we're going to go grab our rectangle tool and draw the front of the table. So the table is going to look like it's coming out at us, working more with perspective. So we're going to make the front of the table by clicking and dragging along the front base of our canvas. And we'll go in and edit colors here in a second. But first we want to make sure our rectangle is perfectly aligned. So we're going to go up to Object and down to Align and Distribute to open that panel. Then under this drop down box where it says Relative to, we're going to drop down and select Page. And then we're going to click Center Objects Horizontally, this button right here. And that perfectly centers the rectangle on our page. Then we're going to click the Align Bottom Edges button, which is this one right here. And that will align the bottom edge of our rectangle perfectly with the bottom edge of our page. So once you've done that, you can go ahead and close that panel. Now we'll adjust the color of our table by going up to Object and opening up our Fill and Stroke panel. And with our Fill and Stroke panel, we want to go to our HSL tab and make sure that's open. Then we want to make sure our blur tab, our blur slider is all the way to the left and that the opacity slider is all the way to the right. So if not, go ahead and make those adjustments now. On the hue slider, click and drag so that you are over a reddish orange color. And then on the saturation slider, click and drag the arrows all the way to the right. So make sure those are all the way to the right. And then with the lightness slider, click and drag until you have a nice dark brown color. So adjust your lightness slider until you have a nice brown color like so. And when you're done, your rectangle should look similar to this. But first, I also need to turn off my stroke color there. So you should just have a rectangle with no stroke color. So now we're going to go ahead and minimize your Fill and Stroke panel, and back in your Layers panel, we're going to add a new layer above background. So have background selected, then click Add New Layer, and we're going to call this Layer Guides. And click Add. Now we have a Guides layer above our. So with our Guides layer selected, we're going to go ahead and close the eyes of these other layers so that we're not distracted and we can really see what we're doing. And next I'm going to have to zoom out just a little bit so I can see my whole canvas here. Then you're going to grab your pencil tool. And on this guide layer we're going to draw some guides so that we can properly create perspective with our table. So with your pencil tool selected, you're going to click on the top left corner of the front of our table and then click and drag over to the top right corner of your canvas. Next we're going to click on the top right corner of our table and click and drag that over to the top left corner of our canvas. So your page should look like this. Then a little ways below center, so about right here, we're going to click and drag a horizontal line across our page. So click and hold Control down to make sure our line is nice and straight all the way across your page, and click again. So now we're going to grab our selection tool, and with this horizontal line, this space is where we're creating our tabletop. So from the horizontal line and inside these guidelines down to the front of our table, this is the tabletop that we're creating. So use your up and down arrows to adjust your horizontal line and get the table the size and that you want it. Since we're doing the 1-point perspective, it looks like it's going off into the distance in the back. You can adjust that horizontal line to make your table go as far back as you'd like. And then when you have that horizontal line right where you like it, go ahead and lock your guides. And now we're going to go back to our table layer and unlock that if you locked it previously. And then go and grab your bezier tool. And we're going to draw in our table based on our guidelines and then fill it in with color. So we're going to want, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And you're going to want to start down here in the corner where you started those guides. And actually I see that my guideline's off just a little bit here. So I want to make sure that that is right on so I'm following correctly with my, my bezier tool. So if your guideline's off a little bit, you might want to make some adjustments to get that right on there. Okay, I'm going to go back to my table tool, or table layer, grab my bezier tool, and get to work. So click to start where your guideline starts, and then we're going to drag up to where that guideline meets our horizontal line and click. Then we're going to come across and click, and then follow your guideline down to the corner of the table and click. And then we're going to drag to right about the middle of our table because we want to make sure that everything gets colored in correctly. And then finally we're going to end by dragging back over to this first point. Good. Now let's go grab our selection tool. Make sure our tabletop is selected. Then we're going to go back and open our fill and stroke panel. And in the toolbox we're going to go grab our dropper tool and then click the table's front rectangle. So right now it should be the same color, but we're going to make some adjustments to get that to be a little different. In the fill and stroke panel, in the HSL tab, click and drag the lightness slider to the right to make the top color lighter. So with our selection tool grabbed, grab your lightness tool. And I'm on the stroke. Make sure we're on the fill tab here. And we're going to drag that lightness bar just a little bit over so it's a little lighter than the front of our table. So adjust that lightness until you like it. And then we're going to go and grab our selection tool, select the top part of that table to make sure it's selected. Then you're going to hit the page down key, which is on your right next to where your arrows are on your keyboard. You're going to hit the page down key, and you'll notice that if I undo, you'll see that it kind of slid the top of our table behind that front part of our table. Since they're both on the same layer, we just kind of had to adjust those within the layer. So you may have to hit page down 1 or 2 times in order to get that to work. So go ahead and save where you're at, and next we're going to be adding a book. First thing we're going to do is add a new layer, so go ahead and lock the layers that are unlocked. Click on Bold and then select New Layer, and this is going to be called Book. So with our book layer selected, we're going to go grab our 3D box tool and draw a book on our table by clicking and dragging. And with your book, you want to make sure that to adjust your vanishing point handles, we want to take our red left handle and make sure it's the same point where the horizon meets the edge of our canvas, and the right handle we want it where the horizon meets the right edge of our canvas, like so. And then click on the X to kind of adjust your book. And then we're going to resize it a little bit. So the top part is obviously the top of our book. This darker edge is the spine. So just to kind of give you an idea, we want to make sure that it's a little bit longer than it is wide, since this is the spine of our book. So once you have your book sized how you want it, make sure it's sitting fully on the table. Go ahead and with your book selected, go up to Path and Object to Path. And then we're going to open up our Fill and Stroke panel. We're going to put some strokes on this book so that we can see the edges clearly. So with the stroke tab selected, go ahead and click flat color. And under stroke, and right away you can see that black line show up on all my edges. Under stroke style, you want to make sure we have a width of 1 and that it's set at pixels. So your book should look similar to this at this point. Now we're going to add some color to our book. So you can grab your node tool and select just the top part of our book and go to your fill tab and adjust those color sliders so that you get whatever color you want. I like purple, so I'm going to make a nice purple book. And then once you get the top part the color you want, make the spine of your book a different color. I'm going to go with kind of a reddish color, I think. Like that. So you can color the top and spine of your book any color you want, but for the side here, we're going to make that white because it's our pages. So click the right side of the box to select it, and then set your fill and stroke to fill color of white by moving. And white is simply having all of these sliders over to the right at 255. Gives us a nice white color for our pages. So now with our nodes tool, we're going to give some shape to our book. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, grab my nodes tool, and I'm going to curve these pages in just a little bit, like so, because there's usually some nice curve to a book's pages. And then we're also going to adjust the curve of our spine a little bit. Oops. Make sure that's selected, and drag that out just a little bit. And same with this point right here. So we have some nice curve to our book. And if you find this straight line from the other edge, we can go ahead and curve that line as well. So make sure you get rid of that straight line that was behind that edge. Now we're going to add some gradient to our spine. So come grab your gradient tool and select your spine. And then add gradient by clicking from the bottom and dragging up to the top edge of the spine. And if your gradient appears transparent like mine does right now, make sure you click and drag your opacity clear to the right so it doesn't have that transparent look. Now select the bottom square stopper on our gradient, and we're going to adjust the color in your fill and stroke panel. We're going to change the stroke color to a black or dark gray. Sorry, I was trying to read the instructions there. So let's slide our hue all the way to the left and our saturation all the way to the left, and then choose a darker color for your gradient there, and then adjust your gradient handles until you like the way it looks on the spine. Next we're going to add shadow. So go into your shadow or your layers panel, unlock your shadow and unhide it so that we can see it. We're going to grab our ellipse tool and draw an ellipse kind of coming out from under our book. Might have to adjust it to make it nice and wide enough, or rotate it a little bit. Okay, come on. Then you're going to go ahead and select one of your other shadows, hit Control-C to copy, and then select that ellipse again, and we're going to paste style to our book shadow. So once you get the shadow the way you like it with your book, go ahead then and hold down Shift to select your book, and you're going to go up to Object and group those two items together so that when I move my book, the shadow moves along with it. And we're actually going to do that grouping with all of our objects. So with your layers panel back open, unlock your bowl and grapes, get your selection tool, and click and drag so that you cover the shadow and our bowls and our grapes. Go up to Object and Group. Then you can lock those and unlock your decanter and shadows, and click and drag over those items to group those together. So do that with all of your objects on your table, your wine glass and your shadow as well, and make sure you arrange them so that they're all sitting nicely on your table. And submit that with the other project we created for 6A, zip those together and submit it.